Fun fact, the contemporary use of the chest rig draws its history from the Vietnam War. And you might think that it was some sort of patriotic development coming from the American soldiers, but no. Rather, the mass manufacture of the AK pattern rifle had created a problem. See, the magazine was either too long or too tall to be effectively used by the Viet Cong, which had a shorter torso. And so they moved the magazines from their hips on the belt line onto the chest. And thus, the modern chest rig was born. Now, that might be apocryphal, even if it is a bit of a lore drop, but what we're running into today and what we've seen is that at least in the contemporary gun culture, it's not really a debate about chest rig versus plate carry anymore. That's really just an SEO or a search engine optimization term. But with a little bit of reading and a little bit of time, it's pretty easy to come to the conclusion on how they're different platforms. A plate carrier carrying body armor is different from a chest rig, which is typically used in conjunction with a ruck. So since that's common knowledge, this episode isn't really going to be plate carrier versus chest rig, rather a bit of a review and some time spent with the Brave Castle chest rig, which they sent me some years ago. Whether you're looking for a custom rifle or you have some self-sufficiency in mind, Obsidian Arms might be your people. They have a series of punch-in toolkits that I have been using as they've been supporting us for the last year and some change. And the tools here, this one specifically for an AR-15, do work on a BRN 180. However, they also take the edge off of all those little springs that, well, can easily get lost in the process. So if you are looking to pick up one of these, there is a code in the description below for you to get 10% off, as well as if you want to head over to their website and get a hold of them if you're trying to bring your own ideas to market and need precision machining to do that. That being the case, let's get back to the show. By now, it's become much more common knowledge that a chest rig and a plate carrier aren't meant to fill the same role. A chest rig oftentimes is paired with a ruck and is used in longer movements and, well, longer patrolling activities, oftentimes mistaken as reconnaissance or recce, which you see in a ranger school-like pattern or in a ranger school-like environment. And you can dig back into history and look at the Vietnam War even further to see how this kind of equipment is very different than, say, the night raid of the global war on terror. With the impressive increase in supply line capabilities and the improvements to medicine, the idea of a plate carrier does serve its purpose, but we're not really here to debate one or the other. They're really different things, and it's not really to get into the apocalypse because, well, that topic's rather boring. Now, this episode is a bit of a review on the Brave Castle chest rig, which I am wearing now. And it's different than many of the other chest rigs that I've seen in the past in ways that I thought were beneficial, but in order to test it out, I ended up taking it to a small unit tactics course at DARC. It was, in fact, their small unit tactics Tusk course. Not easy to say. We do it with the best with what we can. And that set the criteria for testing out this chest rig, which I've had for some time. Now, DARC is not a name that needs introduction in the tactical environment, but they offer a series of courses, and I had the opportunity to attend one of their small unit tactics Tusk courses earlier this year, which, for those who haven't gone to Ranger School or don't have the opportunity or have not joined the military, this might be an opportunity for you to get that experience, albeit in a much shorter environment. I mean, much shorter profile. You have 5 days instead of the 60-ish that you might spend in, the sticks for Ranger School. And that included tasks like reconnaissance and long-range patrolling, and it included small unit tactics like react to contact, break contact, but it also was built around the living out of your ruck, sort of, for at least the week. You had times to go back and refit and rekit, but what that meant for me and having a chest rig is I wanted to make sure that it would hold up throughout the entire week, going back to sort of like a week-long torture testing of, well, this chest rig. And before I get much further, I didn't modify the chest rig at all. I just added to it. And so there's some different parts here that don't come bone stock, and we'll get into that in the video. But to summarize it, The Brave Castle chest rig fits between a couple of common categories when somebody might be looking for a piece of equipment like this. Now, chest rigs typically come in 3 varieties. You have the entirely sewn together. You have something large like this one, this Cry AVS, but this you have something like this by Cry Precision, where all of the pouches are already sewn into the platform. You can't really move things around, but you get what you get, and if it has everything you need, it really can fit your needs. Some things like this even can carry a plate in the front if that's what you desire or need, and it also comes with quite a generous amount of stowage as far as admin or support pouches, magazine pouches, which can be used for radios, and so on and so forth. There's a little bit of opportunity to add to this plate carrier, but you don't really get to choose where everything goes. It's in a very standard pattern. Now, onward research, and T-Rex Arms have both built a chest rig of this variety in recent history, and it's a type all sewn together that you see oftentimes in military surplus, not to equivocate military surplus with, say, cheap or poorly manufactured. Just because Cry makes it doesn't mean it's good, but in this case we see companies that typically demand a higher price point are offering complete chest rigs already, and you can see them come in at more affordable varieties elsewhere. The opposite end of that spectrum would be something that you have to build yourself, and Spiritus Systems has certainly led the way with their microfight chest rig options, where you can kind of build it and customize it to your needs, and they certainly had their time in the sun, and they have their place in our current environment. It may not be as advantageous to try to do a microfight chest rig for a 6-day mission in the bush, but they do serve their purpose. And the identifying feature of these kinds of chest rigs, this one by S&S Precision, and you've seen similar models by GBRS Group, and as I said earlier, Spiritus System, the modularity is the word for that. Now, modularity has certainly been a buzzword in the tactical environment for more than a few years, but what you really do get to do is make it the exact way you want it, at a cost, which is dollars. No surprise there. And these kinds of chest rigs, these very small, adaptable, or, well, they can expand. You can see them by companies. Haley Strategic has some concepts of it now, but we've seen these kind of become popular in a zeitgeist of, or a version, a generation of the gun culture, but it's not to be mistaken as like a one-size-fits-all chest rig. Now there's also something that's kind of in the middle, and that came before the hypermodular ones, and that was when placards became really popular on chest rigs and plate carriers. The idea is that you could have a one-piece placard, maybe with some modularity, some switching pieces around, and you could either attach it onto your plate carrier, or you could take it off and put straps on and use it as a chest rig. That way you had the same kit setup on your body armor as you did your chest rig. This is both old and new at the same time. The older version of it, which was seen, if there's some images floating around of Delta Force in the late 90s or early GWAT era, who would have a chest rig over a slick plate carrier. You've seen that style of load-bearing systems or carrying equipment happen before, but we saw a distinct evolution in that placard style, where you would have this Velcro backed with a panel that you could cover the Velcro piece, so you could attach to the front of your plate carrier with little hooks. And those ranged from more specific or more pre-built systems like this Cry AVS to more modular like the opposite end, your Spiritus, your S&S Precision, and so forth. But we're not really here to talk about all the different types of chest rigs. We're really here to talk about the Brave Castle chest rig. Now, this one's kind of unique in its own way. Not to say everyone's a unique snowflake, but it borrows from multiple elements. You can see here on my side, it carries its magazines with a pre-sewn in system, but has Velcro and options for you to add onto it. The same thing goes for the front here. I've got a very generic admin pouch, which is by Eclipse, and I have no idea where I got it, how I got it, or how it got here, but it's sort of threaded through the Velcro front to make a general admin pouch on my front. And if I keep rotating around, I can fit more magazines, or where I'd keep a medical kit during DARC, during the small unit tactics portion of Tusk. And this one was sent to... I need to make a disclaimer too. This chest rig was sent to me quite a few years ago by the owner of Brave Castle with no expectations on his end. And I sat on it for a while thinking, oh, it might be fun to do like a white boy Peshmerga take on it, but instead it ended up going to DARC. And instead of taking something hyper modular like the S&S Precision with its hydrophobic capabilities, or something pre-built like this Cry AVS, I opted to go with the Brave Castle because not only did I feel a little indebted that I needed to really do something with this, but also it had some qualities that I was really excited to test out. It wasn't too big, too bulky, but it already carried 6 magazines, and then I'd have the 7th in the gun for the event, but also I could scale it to some extent with some of the stuff that I already had in my garage. But before going into the daily loadout of this chest rig that I used at DARC, let's look at its construction and how it's made. The way to take on or don or doff, take off the chest rig is using a first spear tube system with sort of a, your generic tech clip on the top. It makes it really easy to take on and off, especially in the dark, and there really is only one way to put it back on together. From there, we have an elastic cummerbund, not too unfamiliar from what you might see on a plate carrier, but it's sandwiched on the back by a folding set of, Velcro or hook and pile tape if you have to, that allows you to hang things off of it like this Faro Concepts Roll 1. Then you've got, again, it's all entirely covered with this option for Velcro to attach things to it, but the pockets that are sewn into that cummerbund style already hold magazines. The front is perhaps the most interesting because instead of having a top-down type of flap, it has a side-to-side. It kind of folds over itself. And what you can do, and what I ended up doing, is I ended up being able to stow a radio through a Faro wing plus their radio pouch in the exact same spot that I would carry it on a plate carrier, but I took it off because it's already back on the plate carrier. So that meant I could easily carry all the equipment that I needed, not with modification to the system, but it was clearly well thought out on how things might be added to it. It has a classic 3 rifle shingle on the front, and that is secured again by that side-to-side folding Velcro, at least on this older model, which I threaded the MOLLE strips through on this GP pouch in order to make a general purpose or an admin pouch on that front. Below it, I was able to hang a dangler. This one is also by Faro Concepts, which tended to do pretty well. It also felt like it was a little tucked under, especially when I loaded out my admin pouch. It could become a little bit more difficult to get to, but it was never so far out of the way that I couldn't make use of it. One feature about the Brave Castle chest rig that I do like is that you can configure it in either an X pattern or an H harness pattern, depending on what your body type is or how you want to have it configured. Both are an option for you. Neither is blocked out by the design. As you can see here, I've got some tabs dangling that I'd need to secure again, but overall, it's a nylon construction with tri-glides and plastic buckles. There's no real metal in this piece. Now, being prepared with your gear is going to be something important in a Tusk type environment or at DARC, where you don't want to be that guy who's always struggling to put his kit on when everybody's getting out the door. That being the case, the tube system by First Spear really did shine, making it really easy to put on and take off this chest rig. So let's get into the loadout. Like I said earlier, one of the things that I valued most about this system was the ability to carry at least 6 magazines on my body at any given time without any additions, modifications, or attachments to the chest rig. These are all inherently part of it, and you even have some adjustability on the front end to make sure that they're a little bit snugger, especially as that environment gets a little bit more loose. Now, as you can see here, it doesn't have any positive retention, any way to strap this magazine down, and if I were to, say, take a really hard fall, I might lose 1 or 2 magazines along the way. That can be modified, it can be adjusted, but I never really had that issue during the time I was in the course. So with 6 magazines plus 1 in the gun, I've got my 210 round loadout, which is very common. It's a very standard amount of ammunition expected to be carried by somebody in that environment. If you're going to carry more, it's typically carried in the ruck, whether already jammed in a magazine or in some cases even loose. But I was able to fit, as I was talking about earlier, I was also able to fit a radio system on the left here by using a wing system by Faro Concepts. That kept the radio at the same point and the same place that I would typically keep it on a plate carrier, and I kept a PTT, as you can see by the shot cord, up on my shoulder so that it was easy to get to during the more intense moments of the course. I never was looking for or searching for my push to talk because, well, it was always where I had been training with it for the last 15 years. For a knife, I chose a Tour mullet, which I modified only slightly by wrapping some hockey tape around the front end of the grip so that it would stick in a little bit better into that holster. And then I wrapped this with Velcro or hook and pile tape on both sides and kept it wedged in between the folds of the front piece of the chest rig. That held out until the last day. It was the last day of Darcy when the humidity and the heat defeated the adhesive that kept that attached. And so if I were to do it again, I would make sure that this was more hard mounted to the system. It's not a fault on Tour. It's not a fault on Brave Castle either. It was just something that I was trying out to see how well it worked. Even though it was protected mostly from the elements by the admin pouch in front, and secured by a double layer of hook and pile tape or Velcro underneath, it ultimately ended up being the adhesive of the material itself that gave way. If you've heard me talk about knives before, one of the things I think a good field knife should be is have a little bit of material on it, a little bit of mass, a little bit of weight, because you're going to be using it for more things than, say, just, well, knife stuff. It's not really a knife fighting knife. It's more of a multi-use tool at this point in time. It did come in handy having a specific knife on hand, despite also carrying a multi-tool. Now for the main general purpose pouch. It carried some signaling. It carried my land nav gear, some signaling gear, as well as, well, what an admin pouch should. So first of all, I had a compass, map, protractor, map markers, as well as a pen and something that I could use on that map. I kept a GPS system with me because I wanted to try different ways of using different equipment, as well as an ATAC system, which is something that I'm learning on more later in life, despite it being out now for quite some time. But primarily, I could do all my land nav with a map, and if I wanted to, I could square it up with a GPS. And finally, playing with ATAC, being able to learn it in the field was something that they allowed us to do. I wouldn't recommend it if you are not familiar with map and compass at this time. Take the opportunity. If you have the opportunity to go to a DARC course and you are not as confident with land nav with map and compass, go use that course as an opportunity to polish those skills up. Clean it up. Don't resort to something like your GPS. Not because we want to have some sort of moral adage like your GPS will fail you, or that it's going to give off a signal and it's going to compromise your location. It's that the point of the course and the value of this kind of training is to clean up the skills that you want to work on. Go improve your land nav at Darcy. Don't use it as simply an identifier that you need to clean up your land nav. So that going on. Sorry about the moralizing. So I kept a map, a compass, multiple protractors, usually 2 different maps because one would always get damaged, and then map markers, ways of notating, write in the rain notebooks, usually 2, as well as a VS17 panel, which looks like this. And it exists in your signaling material. Now, VS17 is a signaling material. It's like a cloth that you see oftentimes used in the military, whether it's for identifying or giving off your location so that aircraft can find you. It has multiple uses depending on where you're at. But I would also keep a whistle in there. Didn't really use the whistle as much as I thought I would, but hey, it was there. I didn't run out of it. And in the dangler on the bottom here, I would keep either a headlamp, which sometimes ended up back in the GP pouch. There was oftentimes a tourniquet on the bottom or on the side through another form of dangler pouch or dangler sleeve. This one by Burnproof Gear. And then oftentimes I'd keep a thermal unit down here, a handheld thermal, which is a little bit larger, a little bit bulkier, and I could keep it underneath, which kind of protected it from the elements. It kept it from taking the brunt if I were to say stumble and fall. But being able to carry a handheld thermal, also have night vision, also have, we also tried using some drones in the course, really did push our capabilities. The one thing I would have wanted to be able to add would be a set of binos, which would have really increased my capabilities of observation and reconnaissance in the time, but I oftentimes ended up carrying those inside a small rucksack or a small backpack. As far as medical kit would go, I would rely on the Roll 1 for all the large bleeding and hemorrhaging stuff, and then I would keep a smaller med kit, first aid kit, IFAK, off in this larger pocket to the right, which is a feature of the Brave Castle where most of the magazine slots, most of the pockets built in the cummerbund are AR-15 or some AK-ish size, whereas there's one larger one all the way off to the right that would sit on a person's right hip. Now for performance. It would not be appropriate to just consider what the chest rig does itself. As we kind of mentioned earlier in the introduction, chest rigs typically are used with rucksacks. And it does one no good if your chest rig has straps or a centerpiece which conflicts with where your ruck is carried. I was using a Malice pack, which is a modified Alice pack, or a modified, improved style of Alice pack with a metal frame and a nylon bag on top of it. That was the rucksack that I used for this course, partially out of familiarity and partially because I knew at any point in time, I knew at any point in time it would carry the equipment that I needed. I could keep my water, my sleeping system, my foodstuffs, my changes of clothes, your basic carrying. You could fit a lot into that ruck and you could compartmentalize it because it has all these little pockets on the outside. Again, similar to a pre-sewn chest rig where this is something that you learn in Ranger School is that certain pouches always carry certain things. So if I say need a rain cover, I know it's always going to be in this pouch. If I need dry socks, it's always going to be in this pouch. If I need a change of batteries, it's always going to be in this pouch, and so on and so forth. And that was important to being able to use this chest rig in conjunction with something else. At no point in time, whether I was using that larger ruck or a smaller frameless, a smaller backpack, I used a small scout pack kind of a trail pack almost, by Hill People Gear. And at no point in time was I encountering binding or crunching or straps competing for space on my own physical real estate of my body. It worked out really well as far as no rubbing, no pinching, no cutting, no issues there. And after attending the course for a week, what was the environment like? Swamp, 100 degrees, 90 degrees, mosquitoes, bugs, water, rain, hail even. Getting heavy rain every day, a lot of water, a lot of swampy environment. That kind of environment can be really hard on equipment very quickly, especially cotton-like gear, but even nylon itself. And so that goes into where it kind of began to fail a little bit. One of the weaknesses of a Velcro-like system, or one of the weaknesses of that hook and pile tape, is that in that humid, wet environment, it can lose its integrity rather quickly. I'm not talking about immediately, but it definitely works better in a drier environment, an arid environment, which is where I live now and did most of my deployments. In those more humid environments, in those hot, swampy, and wet environments, it can start to lose a little bit of its grippiness, which is the only point that needs to be made. I didn't really encounter it much on the sides, and I kept all magazine retention quite well. The elastic of the cummerbund maintained integrity through the entire course. But over time, this this kind of front-mounted GP pouch would start to slant and slope further and further and further down, and that's more on my fault than it is on the Brave Castle chest rig itself, because I'm literally just looping it through and then hoping that it remains secured by the Velcro, but it was playing to the weakness of the system. What does that mean? If you're going to be out in the field, don't just loop things through Velcro and hope the Velcro to hold. Expect it to lose a little bit of its integrity over the course of a couple days. It immediately sprung back as soon as I got it dried out, but I did notice that after making a long swamp movement, it started to get more and more and more loose and more baggy. And so that would be a limitation of the design that you might not encounter in a pre-sewn system or in something that's mollied together, so long as you're willing to pay for it with the custom design, or you're willing to deal with what you get with a pre-sewn system. It ended up being a nice balance, again, between the two, because I didn't have to put a lot into it. I would want to add a couple of points of attachment to the front so that this general purpose pouch is a little bit less likely to slant down or roll down, but that, again, had to do with the way that I'd mounted it. And then for my knife attachment, I would want to actually hard attach it with some 550 cord or something that is not going to degrade in the heat in the swamp. Now, where does this fit in? Right out of the box, the Brave Castle chest rig would be perfect for something more of a flat range environment, with an opportunity to scale it up, as we've seen with things like danglers, roll ones, or even the ability to utilize some of the newer systems that are coming out with like wing systems for plate carriers. The Brave Castle system actually adapts those quite well. It takes the best parts of our modern plate carrier suites by Cry, Pharaoh, Spiritus, and so long and so forth, and it applies some of those features into the chest rig itself. You can take advantage of some of the extra pouches and equipment that you already have, or you get to use common systems that you know that are already reliable to build out the chest rig. Its con, which I'm being specific as a con, is that it is held together on the front by Velcro, and you do have to have a little bit of know-how on how this system works or how this equipment works, especially in the environments that you're in. If you've never carried a nylon equipment before in your area of operations, you'd want to figure out a little bit more, and that does provide lessons along the way. While it does offer me the suite and the way to use my chest rig in similar fashion, or outfit it in a similar fashion to how I would a plate carrier, it has one unique difference, that being that instead of it having a top-down flap, which wouldn't really work on a chest rig like this, it has this sort of side-to-side system. It'll be interesting to see what comes out through the company. It comes out from Brave Castle in the future, because I've already been able to see that they've changed it. They've made some significant changes to the chest rig since I received this one. And I want to take the end of this episode to be thankful to Darcy for letting me attend their course, as well as for Brave Castle for sending this out and trusting me with it for the better part of 4 years. I think I think you or he sent it out to me in 2021, maybe 22, and it's gone from, I've pulled it out every once in a while to try to kind of, I want to do something with this. But then when Darcy came about, it was the perfect opportunity to really push it through the ropes. Does it hold up to the strenuous environment? Absolutely. Does it require a little bit of finesse? Certainly. Can that be very rewarding? Absolutely. Is it a one-size-fits-all? No. Is it better than any other chest rig? It fits its purpose. It has its place. And that place is somewhere slightly more pre-built, or more pre-built than your hyper-customized micro chest rig system, but more customizable and usable than your entirely pre-sewn system. Where it's going to lack is you can't really do a split rig with it, and you don't really have large GP pouches that you can put on the side. But if you are comfortable having a little bit of a stack on the front and building it out that way, you can fit quite a lot and carry it very well with this chest rig. I would say it shines best as something scaled higher than a micro chest rig, something higher or more aggressive than a micro style chest rig, but not something that is purely a Ranger School, big army, big logistics design. With that being the case, I've been away from the internet side of the gun culture for a little while. I was able to attend this course almost 2 months ago, and now we are facing August, and all of the rest of the drama is hitting the internet as we speak. I was thankfully away from it for some time. But if you want to help the channel out, you want to support what we do here, we do have our website, we have merch there available, as well as any sort, if you want to comment on things that you'd like to see on the chest rig, questions that you have that I didn't answer, or other types of equipment that you typically see get missed in the reviewing circuit, let me know, because I've got a couple of smaller bits and pieces, and not one-offs, but different pieces of equipment that I've been testing out for some as long as a year, and I want to make sure that I prioritize those for your viewing. This has been the Redacted Culture Cast, doing a review of the Brave Castle chest rig through the context of a DARC Small Unit Tactics course. And if you want to support the show, you can always head over to redactedllc.com or find us on Instagram, social media, so on and so forth. Leave a like, leave a comment. You know how social media works. If you do that, it keeps us running. And if you want to support the channel, you can head over to redactedculture.locals.com to support us directly. With that being the case, don't forget, go forth and conquer.